Hello everyone. My name is Elise. Welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing so good today. We are doing a very anticipated video for me today because anticipated is in the title and it is my anticipated releases for 2024, specifically the months from January through April. I like to split them into thirds of the year to make it more manageable for me, and that also gives time for me to get notified of books that are coming out later in the year as well, because I'm sure there will be more. And I already have a ton of anticipated releases. For this period alone, I have 21, plus I have a whole bunch for later in the year that I already know I want to read. And there will be more to come out. So that list is just gonna grow and grow and grow. I think this is the most anticipated releases I've ever had for a year going into it. So it's gonna be a banner reading year for me. I'm very excited. And I'm filming in front of my tree today. We're in a little bit different of a spot because I have my laptop over here. So if you see me looking over here, I'm looking at the laptop because there's no way I can memorize all of these blurbs. So I will be looking over here. And yeah, in front of the tree, you're welcome, Albert, who asked me to film in front of the tree. And we have a special tree in a way because my husband loves these like wool ornaments that are on our tree. Our tree is entirely animal ornaments and they're all wool. I find some of them quite creepy, like this mouse flower person, but some of them are very cute, like the dog. But my husband loves them, so we'll let him do what he wants to do on the tree. And with that, let's go ahead and get into these books for January through April of 2024. Now we're gonna start in the publication order, or at least the publication order as we know of thus far. Disclaimer, these are always subject to change. So first book of the year that I'm anticipated for. It is one that I've been waiting for a while, and that is Nonfiction. This is by Julie Myerson, and it's published by Tin House Books. And this book says that it's about a mother who is a novelist whose child seems intent on destroying herself, which already sounds very intriguing. But I think this weaves between the narrator's childhood themselves, the present in which their own daughter is intent on destroying themselves, whatever that means, and then also the unresolved relationship that they had with their own mother. So I think we get 3 separate timelines is what I'm getting so far, and it's supposed to be about this person reckoning with the world around them. And I love these stories that have different generations of women in them, so this very much seems in vein with that, and very excited for this one. I also think the cover is gorgeous. And Nonfiction comes out on January 2nd. So next up, we have a book coming out on January 30th, and it's a nonfiction book called Come Together. The byline is The Science and Art of Creating Lasting Sexual Connections. This is by Emily Nagoski. I should say Dr. Emily Nagoski. And she very famously wrote Come As You Are. She also wrote Burnout. I love Come As You Are. I've read it several times and I often use it for work. And this is kind of a follow-up to that. And I'm very excited for it. I also have Burnout, but I haven't read it yet. It's an illumination of how to maintain a happy sex life in a long-term relationship. I will again use this book for work, lots and lots and lots, I'm sure. So I'm very excited for this one. So if you love Come As You Are, or if you've heard of that and thought about reading it, know that this one will be coming out on January 30th. Next up on January 30th, at least so far, this is the expected publication date, is 1 Hour of Fervor. This is by Muriel Barbery, and she very famously wrote The Elegance of the Hedgehog, which I have not read. And honestly, I'm trying to suss out if this is a sequel to that book or not. But you tell me if you know that. But regardless, it doesn't seem like you need to have read whatever the first book is if it is a sequel, or maybe it's a companion novel. This one follows a young man named Haru, and he's going to a party in Kyoto, and there he meets a woman who is kind of distant, kind of cold. that very mysterious type, and her name is Maud, and they spend 10 intense nights together, and then she leaves without a word. Then he comes to find out that she is carrying his child, and he becomes determined to find her, but she doesn't want to be found, and she's making it very clear that she wants to raise the child alone, and somehow ends up extracting a promise from him that he will leave them alone, but then that has ramifications for, I think, all of them in the future. So that is 1 Hour of Fervor, and this one is published by Europa Editions. And this must be translated, but it does not have a translator listed here. So if I can figure that out, I'll put it down below a little bit later on. But yeah, sounds great, very excited, and doesn't seem to be connected to anything else I can tell, but you tell me if you know any different. All right, next up we have The Tainted Cup. This is by Robert Jackson Bennett, and it's coming out on February 6th. And this is an author I have read from before. He wrote a fantasy trilogy. The one that I've read is called Foundry Side, the first one. I'm not sure if that's the name of the trilogy as a whole, but I didn't continue on in the trilogy, but I really enjoyed that first book. I read it back when I was reading more types of fantasy novels, but I really did enjoy it and thought he was a great writer, and this sounds definitely up my street because it's a Sherlock Holmes and Watson inspired tale, and it's a mystery novel, so that sounds fantastic. And this says that it's a mix of detective fiction and brilliant world building, and it definitely has some fantasy elements to it, but it follows a murder, and when the person who is killed, there's like a tree growing out of them, and I think that has to do with some like contagions that are part of the magical system in this world. And then we follow our main character, Anna, who is a detective who's very brilliant, very eccentric, and is supposed to play the Sherlock type character. She has her assistant, who I think is named Dinios, who I don't believe is fully human, and they're supposed to play the Watson-like role. So I'm very fascinated. This mix between Sherlock Holmes inspired mystery with fantasy from an author that I've read before and really enjoyed, I think could be a hit for me. So that is The Tainted Cup, and this one is published by Del Rey. All right, next up we have The End of Love by Tamara Tenenbaum, and this one is published by Europa. It's coming out on February 6th, and this is a nonfiction that I think has lots of memoir elements to it, and it's supposed to be a contemporary understanding of romantic love and how the contradictions of inherited traditions and technology affect the way that we build relationships. That's enough for me. I do know that the author was born and raised in an Orthodox Jewish community and also in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. So yeah, I think that will be a really interesting intersection for me to read from because it's so different from my own life. And I love this topic as a whole. I love reading about relationships, especially in the modern era. So I think this sounds fantastic and can't wait to get to it. Next up, we have My Side of the River. This is coming out on February 13th, and it's by Elizabeth Camarillo Gutierrez. This one is a memoir, and it's about her experience as a US-born daughter of immigrants who at 15, her parents are then forced back to Mexico, and she has to then stay behind as a child and raise her sibling. So it's sort of about the brokenness of the immigration system and how deportation really tears apart families. And I think I'm already know I'm going to love this. So I'm just excited for it to come out and for me to finally get a chance to read it. So sounds fantastic. This one is getting published by St. Martin's Press. Okay, next up we have Thanks for Having Me by Emma Darragh. I'm probably not pronouncing her last name correctly. This one comes out on February 26th, and this one is getting published in Australia. It's getting published by Allen and Unwin. So I don't know if or when it would ever have a US release, but you would need to order it from there for now if you wanted to read it. And this is another one that follows 3 generations of women, so there's a theme going on here. And it first follows Marianne, who is basically aware that they're not a good mother or a good wife, and they're slowly realizing that they don't really want to be either of those things. So they walk out on their life. So that's one storyline. Then you get her daughter's storyline. Her daughter's name, let's see, is Vivian. And I think you start seeing her as an adolescent, and she's constantly searching for meaning everywhere. She feels very abandoned because she kind of was by her mother. And then she ends up having a daughter of her own, a daughter named Evie, and then also starts to realize that maybe this isn't the life that she wanted either. And the blurb is making me feel that she also leaves, and then her daughter Evie is left reeling. So it's like two generations of women kind of leaving their family. And I think there's a lot of like questioning of what they could have done to make their mother stay and stuff like that. Sounds heartbreaking and tender and all those types of things. So I think this sounds fantastic, and I'll definitely be getting it from Australia so I can read it this year. Okay, next up we have maybe my favorite cover from any of these books, and that is Piglet by Lottie Hazell, and this is coming out on, let's see, February 27th. And the US publication has this amazing burger cover, but I know other publications have different cover on them. It's like sweets or something like that. And this one follows our narrator, who has a childhood nickname of Piglet, but then you kind of flash forward and get to see that she has a very successful life now. She has a job that she loves. She has a fiance that she loves. And one of the things that he loves about her are these elaborate dinners that she cooks all the time. As they lead up to the wedding, he basically reveals a secret that is a huge betrayal to her. And then she starts to unravel from there. She decides that she wants to continue to be married, but she starts getting hungry. And I think that her ravenous appetite is sort of like a metaphor for all of the things that she never got but deserved. And I think that's a really fascinating premise. I do think this one might go off the rails plot-wise, which I kind of love. So I'm really looking forward to this one. And this one is getting published by Henry Holt and Company, which is an imprint of Macmillan. But yeah, really excited for this one and adore the cover. So that is Piglet. Next up, we have A Woman of Pleasure. This is by Kyoko Murata and Juliet Winters Carpenter. And this one is getting published on February 27th as well. And it's coming out from Counterpoint Press. This one, I believe, is based on a true event. So it's on a real-life historic Japanese courtesan strike, and it's following a 15-year-old girl in 1903, and she's living in a brothel in Japan. And she eventually ends up becoming one of the highest-ranking courtesans in this brothel and starts understanding this connection between power and sex and money. And then I think that they eventually end up organizing together a lot of the women at the brothel and strike and do a walkout from the brothel in order to try and find the possibility of a new life. It's not like anything I have read before, so I'm really looking forward to this one. Okay, next one is one I'm very much looking forward to. There are a couple like standouts for me, even though I'm looking forward to all of them. But one that is a standout for sure is called Counsel Culture. This is by Kim Hye-Jin, and it's translated from the Korean by Jamie Chang, and it's coming out on March 5th. This one is published by Restless Books, which I was unfamiliar with up until 2023 when I picked up one of their books, Fishing for the Little Pike. I haven't read it yet, but it sounds so amazing, and there are plenty of Restless books that I'm looking forward to in 2024. This one follows our narrator, who is a very successful therapist and a regular guest on a popular TV program, and one day they make a scripted comment that has a negative viewpoint towards a public figure that later ends up committing suicide. My dog is coming out. If you can hear him, he's probably going to start drinking water, but we're going to talk over him. And she finds herself ostracized by her friends. She gets fired from her job. and her marriage begins to unravel. So she pretty much loses everything. I think the title is supposed to be a play on cancel culture, so she's basically getting canceled. And then you start getting information through letters the narrator is writing, and she's very alone. And then one day when she's on a walk, she meets this young 10-year-old girl who's trying to feed a stray cat in the neighborhood, and ends up forming an unlikely relationship with her, and that connection starts to bring her back into the larger world a little bit. This is hitting so many buzz points for me. I think diving into the nuances of cancel culture is something that I have a lot of interest in, and like all the damage that cancel culture can have. Plus, I like the therapy bent to it. I like that it sounds like there's going to be a heartwarming element of her making this connection with a young girl, and I think I will enjoy all of those things. So that is cancel culture. Okay, next up we have Marshland, and this is a big book. How many does it say how many pages this is? I don't know if it says how many pages this is, but I know that it's huge, and this one is by Otohiko Kaga, and it's translated by Albert Novick and getting published on March 5th. And this one is really expansive in the time frame. So it starts with pre-World War II and then goes all the way into 1960s Japan. And it follows our narrator, whose name is Atsuyo. I think that's probably wrong. And he's a mechanic living in the city, just trying to make it by. And he has a criminal past that nobody really around him knows about. But one day he ends up going to a demonstration with his nephew, a political demonstration, and meeting this woman. This woman is younger and really at the forefront of activism, but potentially that activism turns into terrorism. And then Atsuyo and this woman end up finding themselves framed for a lethal bombing of a Tokyo train. So there's more to the blurb than that, but that's all I'm going to give you because I feel like that's enough. Anything else would just muddy the waters. But I think this sounds amazing. I, this year, have been trying to read a few more big books, and it's been really enjoyable to dive into something for a long period of time. So I think this could be a good one to put on my list. So that is Marshland. And next up, we have a book that got put on my radar by my friend Kat, who is also an avid reader. And this one is The Extinction of Irena Ray. It's by Jennifer Croft, who I have not read from before, but I know lots of people love her. And this one is getting published by Bloomsbury, and it's getting published on March 5th as well. And this one follows a group of 8 translators who arrive at a house in this Polish forest, and they are there to translate renowned author Irena Ray's latest magnum opus, Grey Eminence. But within days of their arrival, Irena ends up disappearing without a trace. I think that sounds so fun, and honestly, this is like giving me Writer's Retreat vibes by Julia Bartz, which I did really enjoy earlier in 2023, but the fact that our translators, I think, makes it like even more special for me. And then of course they start investigating, trying to figure out what happened to her, and they start kind of exploring this forest area. It just sounds so atmospheric and plotty and fun, and I'm really interested. Plus the cover is gorgeous and very cool. I like these blue trees going on. So that is The Extinction of Irena Ray. All right, so next one we have is a highly anticipated one in a series that I love and adore, and that is the Veronica Speedball series. This is A Grave Robbery by Deanna Raybourn, and it's coming out on March 12th. This is, I think, the 9th one in that series. Sorry if that's wrong, but I think it's the 9th one. And I won't read the blurb because it is far in a series and I don't want to give anything away. But this is a murder mystery series that is set in Victorian London. And there's also some romantic tension between the 2 main characters, Veronica and Stoker. And they go out and solve mysteries together. It's wonderful. I absolutely loved it. And I'm so excited to have a new one because in 2023, in the beginning of 2023, I caught up through the series. So I have been waiting almost a year now for the next one, and I'm very excited to read it. Plus the title, the play on this title, A Grave Robbery, so hilarious. I love it. So That is the next in the Veronica Speedwell series. So the next book that I have is The Tree Doctor. This is by Marie Mitsuki Mockett, and it's published by Grey Wolf Press. I don't think I've been saying the publishers for the last couple, so sorry about that. I'm not going to go back because it'll be too confusing. But this one's published by Grey Wolf. It's coming out on March 19th, and this one follows an unnamed narrator who is going back to Carmel, California to care for her mother who is ill. And then at the start of that is the beginning of a pandemic. I don't know if this is supposed to be like our pandemic or if it's just a random one, but that's definitely happening. And her husband and kids are back in Hong Kong. So she's starting to care for her mother, feeling the pressures of that. I think feeling the pressures of leaving her family behind, and there's a lot of expectations there. Plus the pandemic is starting. On top of all of that, as if it wasn't enough, she starts becoming preoccupied with her mother's garden, and she's convinced that there is some type of visual puzzle going on in her mother's garden. I think all of this sounds fascinating. I'm curious to see what the author does with everything that's going on here because it is a lot. So I'll be intrigued to see what happens with The Tree Doctor, but it sounds very good. All right, next up we have Annie Bott. This is by Sierra Greer and it's published by HarperCollins, coming out on March 19th. And this one I'm going to read the blurb because I think the blurb is really well written and is definitely what got me interested. So this follows Annie Bott, who was created to be the perfect girlfriend for her human owner, Doug. And she was designed to satisfy his emotional and physical needs. She has dinner ready for him every night, wears outfits that he orders for her, and adjusts her libido to suit his moods. And at the same time, she is learning. Doug says that he loves that Annie's AI makes her seem more like a real woman. So Annie starts to explore more of these human traits because she thinks that's what Doug wants. But then as she becomes more human, her relationship with Doug starts to become more intricate and difficult. So then she starts to wonder, does Doug really want her to be more human, or is that just what he's saying? So I think this is such a fun premise, and I love that more and more books are incorporating AI in them. So this is Annie Bott, very much looking forward to it. Okay, we're coming maybe to the end. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 6 more to go. So next up we have How to Solve Your Own Murder by Kristen Perrin. This is coming out from Penguin Random House, and it's getting published on March 26th. This is a classic murder mystery, and I could just use another one. And I should say, the imprint it's coming out from is Dutton, but that's a Penguin Random House imprint. This one takes place at an English country fair in 1965, and it follows a teenager, Frances Adams, who is with her 2 best friends. But one night she sees a fortune teller who makes a bone-chilling prediction that one day Frances will be murdered. And Frances spends a lifetime trying to solve a crime that hasn't happened yet. And she starts compiling dirt on everyone that she knows, and for decades no one takes Frances seriously until nearly 60 years later, Frances is found murdered like she always said she would be. That sounds so fun. I can't even imagine. I like the setting. I like that it's like the historical English kind of cottage countryside setting, and the idea that like she knew about her murder ahead of time. It kind of gives Knives Out vibes a little bit. But yeah, I think this will be the murder mystery that I need to kind of intersperse some of the heavier reads that are going on here. So that is How to Solve Your Own Murder. Next up, we have The Cemetery of Untold Stories. This is by Julia Alvarez, and it's coming out on April 2nd by Algonquin Books. And I have never read Julia Alvarez before. I've heard amazing things, but some of the premises of her books have just not spoken to me, but this one sounds really, really intriguing. And it's following a struggling novelist who creates this like graveyard for the manuscripts that she's tried but failed to bring to life. And then I think her manuscripts start coming to life. And that sounds fascinating. I don't need to know more than that. It sounds so intriguing, and I definitely want to get to this one. So that is The Cemetery of Untold Stories. Next up, we have another Restless Books book, and that is The Book of Censors Library. How many times can I say book? This is by Bothania Al-Essa. This is translated from the Arabic by Rania Abdulrahman and Sawad Hussein. Hopefully that was okay. And this is a satirical novel. It's coming out on April 2nd, and it follows a book censor. So I think this is kind of futuristic, and he has this job of being a book censor. So he needs to comb through manuscripts at a government office looking for anything that would be unfit to publish. And I think in this dystopia, it's very strict. So you can't have anything about any unapproved religions. You can't have any allusions to queerness, any mention of life before the revolution. So he is starting to get rid of things, but by night, he starts to accumulate some of the things that he's supposed to be destroying, and he starts sharing them with his wife and daughter, and they do these like forbidden readings between the three of them. I think this one is clearly talking about free speech, feels very much like a redone Fahrenheit 451, but I'm really interested to read it, and it sounds fascinating. The cover is bizarre, which I think will probably go with the vibe of the book, but that is The Book Censors Library. All right, next we have one I'm sure will be on a lot of people's anticipated releases list, and that is Knife. This is by Salman Rushdie, and the byline is Meditations After an Attempted Murder, and it's coming out on April 16th. It's getting published by Penguin Random House. This is his memoir that he wrote after he was attacked. And for those who don't know, there is a fatwa out on Salman Rushdie because of subject matter that he wrote in his books, which is basically just like a bounty on him. And he was attacked in August of 2022. And that attack led to the loss of use in one of his eyes and one of his hands. And this is him talking about that and finding his strength again. So I'm sure this will be very heavy hitting. And like I said, I'm sure lots of people will want to read this. And it's important to read this too, right? Because like we were just talking about free speech in the last book, right? Like these are the dangers of not having free speech. So yeah, that will be Knife, again, coming out on April 16th. And next up we have a book called Tenderloin. This is by Joy Sorman, and it's translated from the French by Laura Vergnaud. And this one is getting published by Restless Books as well. It's coming out on April 16th. And this follows Pim, who at the beginning of the book is kind of young, delicate, kind of shy, prone to bouts of weeping, and then they start this apprenticeship with a butcher, and their parents do not have high hopes, but they start to really excel, and as they're excelling, their thoughts tend to become increasingly more and more about meat. Creepy. And I think as time grows, he starts to have more and more of a ravenous obsession with meat, and things might go badly. This is compared to Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, which is horrific. So I would imagine this also gets pretty horrific as well. So that is Tenderloin. And last book that we have here, this is also a food-related title, but this is Butter. It says it's a novel of food and murder. It is by Asako Yazuki, and it's translated from the Japanese by Polly Barton. This one comes out on April 16th, and it's published by Echo. And this does say that it's a cult Japanese bestseller about a female gourmet cook and a serial killer, and the journalist intent on cracking the case. It says it's inspired by a true story, which is concerning, but here's the blurb. There's a gourmet cook named Minako, and they are basically convicted of a bunch of serial murders of lonely businessmen who she's said to have seduced with her delicious home cooking. And she famously will not do any interviews until a single journalist writes a letter asking for a recipe for beef stew, and she just can't resist writing back. And then I think we also get to follow the journalist's point of view. Her name is Rika, and she's the only woman in her news office, and she works very late at night. And when she starts meeting with the serial killer, they start bonding over their love of food. And I think Rika is hoping that this will soften the serial killer, but I think Rika starts getting changed more than the serial killer does. So very fascinating premise. And we have made it, people. We've made it through these 21 books. I'm sure there have been errors along the way, so hopefully I corrected those as I said them. But let me know if any of these sound exciting to you. I think 2024 is going to be such an amazing year of reading for me. I truly can't wait. I already love all of the themes that are starting to come out of some of the books that I'm seeing. I feel like each year there's like 10 to 20 themes that are really heavily used, and I feel fascinated already. So with that, I will see you all in the next video. Bye.